invocation to the ancient rishis, the Purvi Rishaya or Pitara, the ancient fathers. And that's also interesting because the ancient fathers are invoked where? In the Rig Veda, which shows very clearly the Rig Vedic rishis do not consider themselves to be the ancients, although for us they are the ancients. And of course they belong to this line, but they are looking back to an earlier period. Angiraso naf pitaro navagva atharvano brigavach somyasach tesham vayam sumatau yajniyanam abhibhadre saumanase siyama idam nama rishibhyaf purvajebhyaf purvebhyah patigrudbhyah ud iratam avara udparasa unmatyamaf pitarach somyasach asumya iyur avrika ridajnas te no avantu pitaro haveshu idam pitribhyo namo astu adya ye purvaso ya uparasa iyu ye partive rajasi anishata ye vanunam suvrijanasu vikshu. So they talk about the different rishis, the Angiras, our fathers, the Navakvas, those the seers of the 9 rays, and the Atharvans and the Brigus, and all of them they are Somyasa, they are related to the Soma or maybe full of Soma. They have realized that immortality, the nectar of immortality. And it's also a beautiful phrase which comes many times in the Rig Veda, which is also interesting to note. There are certain phrases which several rishis use, not only a common terminology, but also sometimes a whole phrase, a whole line. So, tesham vayam sumatau yajñānam abhipatre saumanase siyama. So may we be in the sumati of these sacrificial powers, in the right thinking, in the grace, and in their bhatra saumanas, in their happy, right mindfulness, which is so beautiful and also in a way, very modern language even from that point of view. So we find that in the Veda also. We find very archaic, ancient imagery, but we find a lot of psychologically clear terms and speech also. So maybe be in the right thinking and in the right mind of these ancients. And then they will say, just may they rise up, those who are beyond and those who are below and those who are in the middle, as if they are existing everywhere, these fathers. And they, unheard, they have realized the eternal life. Because they are ritajna, they are the knowers of the truth. And these fathers, they should further us in our invocations. So they are, you know it maybe as Indians, so they are called together with the gods. Later they become almost a separate category, the Pitris. But in the Veda, I would say the relation with the gods is much closer. And so those who have gone before and those who have followed them, all of them, because for us, Aurobindo says they are still present in the evolution, because they are in charge of the human evolution. That's why they are also called the 7 fathers, because existence has these 7 levels, which in the Upanishads is also expressed, and in the Puranas. So we have not, all the 7 planes of existence or principles have not yet been fully manifested here on the earth. So in Aurobindo's light, it's also, so they are in charge of the evolution, that all the 7 principles will be revealed here in this earthly life. And one more thing before we go into detail, I'll recite one hymn to Agni, because one aspect also of my approach to the Veda is not the poetic approach, because it is actually, it is poetry. But it is mystic poetry, it's spiritual poetry. And there is the formal recitation which was to memorize it, that the text would not be distorted and get lost. And that's the unique achievement of the Indian tradition. It has come to us. But at the same time, there is another way to read it more poetic. So I will recite particularly this hymn, which is from the book 5 of the Atris, to Agni. And also it starts very beautiful, which is also very particular for the Veda. The Rishi talks to you all. So he says, for you, for your growth also, I call this flame, that fire. So that is also very particular in the Vedic hymns. And in every hymn, it's so interesting. The Rishi most of the time says we. Sometimes he says I, but most of the time he says we, as if he always has this collective. And that reminds me of your nice group also, which you call the oneness group. So this is very particular also. And there is even that Samana Sukta at the end of the Rig Veda, that togetherness is even totally emphasized. So just to give you a sense of this poetry. Achavo agnim avasi, devam gasi sano vasu, rasat putra rishunam, rithava parshati dvisha, sahi satyo yam purvejit, devasaschid yam idhire, hotaram mandrajihvamid, suditibir vibhavasum. Sa nodhiti varishtaya shrayishtaya cha sumatya, agnera yodidihinah suvriktibir vareniya. Agnir deveshu rachati, agnir marteshu avishan, agnir no havyavahano, agnim dibih saparyata. Agnis tuvi shravastamam, tuvi brahmanam uttamam, aturtam shrava yatpatim, putram dadati dashushi. Agnir dadati satpatim, sasaha yo yudhan rubi. Agnir atyam ragushyadam, jetaram aparachitam. Yadvahishtam tadaknaye, brihat archa vibhavaso, mahishiva tuatrais, tuadvaja udirati. Tavadyumanto archayo, graveva ujyate brihat, utote tanya turyata, svano artha tmana divah. Evang agnim vasuyavach sahasanam vavandima, sano vishva atidvishach parshad naveva sukratu. So the Rig Veda is the most old, no? It's recognized because the other Vedas in a way all quote from it, so to say. They take over parts of it. And I brought, for example, here you can see already the difference. This is the same editors. So this is the Yajur Veda, the Shukla Yajur Veda. The Krishna Yajur Veda is bigger because the Brahmanas' commentaries are added to it. But that's also, people say the Krishna Yajur Veda is called dark or mixed because they mix the original mantric inspiration with the commentary. The Shukla Yajur Veda is not doing this. But, so there are many ideas, but a lot of this is also in the Krishna Yajur Veda if you compare it. But when you look at it, here you will see that the Yajur Veda takes sometimes a whole hymn from the Rig Veda in the middle of a chapter. So it has its own more prose language. It does not use poetry, pure poetry. It's more rhythmic speech as a prose. But then when there is poetry, that means it took it from the Rig Veda. It's also very interesting to see how the ancients already made use, so to say, of the mantras of the Rig Veda. And that was going on in the Sama Veda, because in the Sama Veda, 90% or more is totally only selected from all over the Rig Veda. You know, like I like in one hymn with 10 verses, I like one verse. I will take that. And I recite that. I did that long ago. I made my own prayer hymns, taking one verse from here, one from there, how I like it. And actually something of that sort the Samaveda is doing. It compiles from all over and makes that into a new sequence and sings it. That's the big difference. No? But basically it's all taken again from the Rig Veda. That's of course that debatable thing. That is which the most, you could say, the usually agreed upon, the most humble, or how would you say, moderate dating is around 1500 BC, which would be already 3,500 years. But that's the most moderate. So some people, the question is always when we think about Harappan, Mohenjo-daro, some people call it now Saraswati civilization, no? That was it before or after? That would be the question. Or was it at the same time? Has it grown up at that time? And here there are totally different opinions. The Western scholars, they always thought it comes afterwards. You know. Some other scholars, they would think it is identical. Some scholars think it is even prior to this, because it's already too formalized, that city life and everything. But at the same time, in the Rig Veda, what I can see also clearly, there is, of course, there are conventions, so to say. There are references to the social life, no? To the chariots and the horses and the goods and things. So you feel it is quite a sophisticated society. That's for sure also. You know. So this is like still something very difficult. But Western scholars especially, they try to reconstruct ancient history through the hymns of the Rig Veda, through these references, which is too vague, I would say. It's a daring attempt. And so that's maybe one of the topic one could in short mention. The interesting thing is, even from my friends in Chennai, they gave me some books which in the last 20 years Indian scholars have published huge books on the Rig Veda. There is, in the recent years, there is a new complete translation by 2 American scholars in English. So when you look, everybody is, so to say, focusing on something, picking out something, and other things he or she leaves actually unexplained. So that's the biggest difficulty of the Rig Veda. Is it even possible to translate a hymn, with everything what it suggests? I would say almost it is not possible, because that is exactly the difference in the ancient mind. So if you talk about these things, there is always a reference to the ritual, to the sacrifice. There's always the reference to the gods, to the lights, and as if they are right in front. And then, of course, some scholars think they are just doing a ritual, and in that ritual they are creating that hymn to pretend as if the gods would be there. That's what the Western scholars think. But so meaning it is, in a way, it is all of that. It is all of that. It means, Aurobindo emphasizes that also in ancient times, how did the gods start to be worshipped? They are worshipped in nature, but how do we think, what does it mean, to worship the gods in the nature? How does it start? In India, even when you go through the village, you will see the termite mound, how they will start, and then they put a stone, and then they make finally a temple, or they they worship the tree or the rock. Everything can be a linga, an indicator, a mark for that. But at the same time, for me, it is most obvious that for the ancients, they were looking beyond that also. Of course, the God is in everything, but first of all, it is in the cosmos. And what is the cosmos? It is in the sky. That is very clear. That maybe one of the early things was to adore the sun as the god and the moon. You see. And so that is very obvious in the Veda. You could see that this is the outer framework. And I would even dare to say in recent years when I went into this, the outer relation is, so to say, the astrology. It is the symbolism of the year, of the cycles of light and darkness. So this is the basic imagery, so to say, around which the rishis build up. And actually when, Sri Aurobindo's works, when you look at them, 500 pages and so many 100 pages, you can easily overread that if you study these books. Actually, he mentions these things, but he doesn't emphasize it because he wanted to show what is the inner content. because he says at ancient time, the ancient mind was always hiding the knowledge. It was covering the knowledge. It was not meant to be just spoken out for the ordinary profane man. It could be misused, he would say. So he sees it always like that the Veda has this double meaning. You could even say it has a triple and quadruple meaning, because there is the ritual, there is the astrology, which goes together, of course, because the ritual is trying to contact the astrology, meaning the powers in the sky which influence us, so to say, the planets and the sun and the moon, to turn them towards us in a good sense. But when you look a bit deeper in the Veda, you see immediately they talk about the God behind these forms. So it's quite clear that for them the sun and the moon are also a metaphor or even an embodiment of some deeper reality. So they look, of course, beyond that. But meaning the ritual usually also very clearly refers more to this astrological, which in India still happens today. It's just maybe people don't reflect upon it, but it's very natural to do this. That's why the festivals are always put at certain constellations, and the birthday and all this, giving your name according to the different constellations. So that is very natural, and that seems to have been very already dominant in ancient times. But the Vedic rishis, they went beyond that, so to say. But they keep this imagery. But many times they don't express it very clear, meaning the language is very fluent and very open. And that is also what Aurobindo says, that's the advantage of the ancient mind, because it was not fixed. The word has not become a fixed token for one thing only. The vision of life is more universal, archetypal you call it, and then the language will reflect that. So one word can mean many things, it can cover many things. The Rig, the Yajur, the Sama. And now he says, one by one, what is what. So the Rig will be the word of illumination, which lights up the mind with the rays of knowledge. Because arch, the Rig root means to shine, and to recite means also to radiate. And then the word of power for the right ordaining of action. That would be the Yachus, because Yach is the root, like in Yachna. So he calls it right ordaining of action. That's what it is actually, this Yachu. Meaning, so they are trying to put this illumination of the rishis into an action, into a form of life. And then, of course, there is this expression, the word of calm and harmonious attainment for the bringing of the divine desire of the spirit. What does he mean for bringing of the divine desire of the spirit? As if that calm and harmonious attainment, that is the Sama Veda, because even Sama means calm and harmonious, which is the root meaning even for the song. So for him it would be like the Rig Veda is the revelation, the illumination, so to say, of the mind, and the Yachur is trying to bring this into action, so to say. And you could say if the knowledge and the action are harmonized, then it would become that ananda, that total harmony of bliss expressed. So in that way, it's also interesting to see the triple Veda, how it is meant. Now the thing is, these are also huge texts, so to do this, it's a big job, but it's really very interesting. And in this context also to see with the later text, I have studied, for example, the second chapter of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. It will start with a quote, some mantras from the Yajur Veda. But out of these 4 mantras from the Yajur Veda, already the first 2 are from the Rig Veda. So then you can see actually this continuity. The Yajur Veda takes 2 mantras from the Rig Veda. We come to this even tomorrow, to the sun god, how to yoke the mind, to do yoga in the mind, so to say. And So then the Yajurveda takes it up and goes on and develops it even into 70 mantras. It's a huge hymn. But then the Shvetashvatara takes just the first 4 or 5 and then goes into the yoga practice and talks about sitting erect and controlling the prana and all that thing. But meaning, so this is really, that succession is there, this connection. He always interestingly translates Atharva as the Rishi of the path, the Atharvan. Because the Rishi himself, the name Atharva is mentioned already in several suktas in the Veda. They will say Atharvan made the path, So that's why he maybe, even from Attar, because At can be like Atiti, is the traveler. At means, the root At can mean to travel. So in that way he would also say the yogi of the path. But there are also other scholars, they relate it to some word of Avesta, of the early Persian tradition, which they say he is the fire priest, which is not a contradiction there, the Attar, so it could be also. But since it's also said, they will say the Bhrigu did this, in one hymn they mentioned several rishi names, what each one did. They created the immortality, and the path was created by Atharvan. So that's also one, we can, of course, I shouldn't get lost in all these details already. We are still trying to introduce also the system of the arrangement of the Veda. But so that path, there is always a way, a path to the immortality. And even the yajna is called advara as a synonym, which means a kind of advancement, a succession, you see. So it is a journey. And that's also, again, when you look in the sky even, how the light grows. When the new moon comes, or when there is the solstice and the light returns. So there is the Shukla Marga and the Dakshina Marga and all this. So that is also all part of the Vedic hymns. And the night and the dawn, Aurobindo talked so much about this, that cycles of growth and of retirement, of rest, or even growing in the life and renouncing the life. It's both, it's a cycle, of growth and withdrawal, so to say. So this is all part of the perception of the hymns. But in general, are you people aware of this, how it is made up, the 10 mandalas? You want to know this, something of this? Good. So this is also, of course, very interesting. People say that Vyasa collected it, because Vyasa itself means asa, setting, and Vyasa, setting together or spreading out, but arranging it, so to say. So it was arranged by Vyasa. And that is, of course, many scholars also have a lot of things to say about it. Why is it 10 books? The interesting thing is, for example, the first book has 191 hymns. And the 10th one also has 191 hymns, as if they wanted to create the same number there. But in the 10th book, you can see some hymns, they are more minor. You would feel it's not necessary to put it there, as if they were put there to add up the numbers. But there is, for example, what you call about the family books in the Rig Veda. So the book 2 up to book 6, I would even say, up to book 7, I would even say 8, each book is dedicated to a certain family. It contains the hymns of a particular seer and some of his sons and grandsons. And that would be, for example, the book 2 is the hymn of the Gritsamada Bhargava, Gritsamada Rishi. And the book 3 is of Vishwamitra. And in this book, I found out there are 5 generations are present, because usually they give the name along with the father, the father's name. And so Vishwamitra, his father is Katin, but then there would be also his Kuta, I don't remember exactly, though it would be Vaishwamitra. So you can really see by naming them and their second name, whether it is a son or grandson and so on. So 5 generations are there in the Vishwamitra book. And then the book 4 is Vamadeva Gautama. Also very interesting, because the son has a whole book. The father, Gautama, is in the first book with quite maybe 30 hymns or something, but he is not in the family book. So the 4th book is all Vamadeva Gautama. And the 5th book is called the Atri Rishis, but there will be many names, so they are called Atreya, relating to the Atri. So there are many, many, many different seer names given. over 80 hymns. And then book 6 will be Bharadvaja Barhaspatya. So he is called the son of Brihaspati. Bharadvaja, also a very famous name in Indian tradition. So these are the hymns by Bharadvaja in the book 6.
So, do these also refer back to the Gotras? Because in India,
Yes.
all of us belong to one Gotra or the other, which goes back to the Rishi.
Yes.
Because Gautama, Bharadvaja, all
Right.
of these are Gotras.
Right.
Also which we refer to.
Yes.
Okay, so that could be the lineage of it.
Right, the lineage, so that still survives in a way. Imagine then what a kind of impact it had, right, that people still, draw their descendants from one of these seers, right. And the seventh book will be Vasishtha, you see. Then there is the eighth book, which I would still call a kind of a family book, because most of the hymns are from the Kanva rishis, that are Kanvas, probably Kanva, but also in the first book, right away, it starts with the grandson of Vishwamitra, and it afterwards come the Kanva rishis. So it is also in the first book. But usually, so the book 2 up to 7 is all family books, really, and the book 8 is more a mix, but still dominated by one family. And then when you come to book 9, so this is the idea. The scholars, because of this, they believe originally they were only family books. So when they collected it, there were different families which had these hymns with them, probably through generations already. And then they asked them probably to ask them all together, because they saw that it was getting lost. And that's what already Yaska says, these early Vedic scholars, they will say so many words I don't know anymore of this Rig Veda, which they use, the rishis. So the idea is probably the knowledge started to get lost, also because the language changed. The language was, so to say, modernized, because the rational mind developed all over the world, you see. And in that way, probably Vyasa was also trying to collect them, that these things don't get lost, and compile them in this particular way. But then, so to say, first they say they were the family books, but there were more hymns. And then, of course, some people, Western scholars, they do a big job in their own way. Maybe even they are most engaged still up to today, but they have their own mind. They want to study history, and they will take it in this way. They will say there were different rulers. So they will feel it was the time maybe of Kurukshetra or of that, where that particular king wanted to arrogate the Rig Veda to itself, that tradition, and then they had to add another book or had to compile. So there are so many ideas about that, which I really say, I don't know. It's a lot of speculation also. And for me, it's not the essential thing. So there are many reasons why it is arranged this way, So they will say the Bharatas, they were a dominant rulership at a certain period in India, and they were, so to say, propagating the Rig Veda and so on. But then the interesting thing is, because in book 9 is the so-called Soma book of the Rig Veda. And in the Soma hymns, you can see, because some rishis even they have references, they give what you call a refrain at the end of the hymn. Like Vasishtha will, 90% of all his hymns, he stops like, Yuyam Pata Swastibi Sadana. He will, at every hymn at the end, he will say that. So then you will know, oh, this is Vasishtha. Or sometimes the rishi names himself in the hymn, which is called the mudra later in the Carnatic music tradition. He signs, so to say, his hymn. And there will be many things, but also the tradition who arranged the Rig Veda like that, they also give always as a title, they will say Rishi, they give the name, and they will give the Devata and the meter. So they also mention the names. So it is very obvious that the 9th book of the Rig Veda was at some point, they felt that the Soma hymns are so important. From all the earlier books which were there, maybe 7 or 8, they took out all the Soma hymns and put them in a separate book. They created a new book, so to say. So then you would have book 2 up to book 8 plus book 9. And then you have, of course, the first book, which is a collection of many, many different rishis. It's the biggest book with the last one, but all these 2 books have so many different seers, you see. Many seers, but also many very interesting hymns are there. And then there is, in the first book, they will also say some of the hymns are more old, so they feel they are added later. That is very true in the 10th book, because also it has both older and newer hymns. But in the 10th book, you have most of the hymns which are in a language which is slightly different. It's a more modern language than in the other hymns. So people could say, this is a later period. And the Western scholarship always thinks, because it's more clearly expressed more mentally, the knowledge, like in the Purusha Sukta, although if you go closer in this hymn, it's not so simple, that symbolism, but the language is more defined, that they will say this is it is from a later period. That's also one topic. Then, is there Varna in the caste or Varna in the Rig Veda? Because it comes only in the Purusha Sukta that this Varna is shown, which even you don't need to call caste already, because it is just showing the different qualities of the people which you can have, which actually we should unite all of them in us. We could become that divine Purusha body, who is the Brahmin, and the Kshatriya and the Vaishya and the Shudra at the same time. But when you look in the hymns themselves, there is the word Brahmana comes all the time, but it's a name for the Rishi who has the Brahman, who has the word, the mantra, and it's even a name for the Maruts, some certain god groups. So I always feel these are not yet the Brahmins as a different category of people. And there is the word Kshatra coming once in a while as power, you see. So these terms are there, but I don't think they have been already specialized, You could say putting in that social system then later on. So that's also interesting. So basically 10 books. Some people will say maybe originally the year had 10 months, like in Roman Empire, it was first 10 months. Then, they try to align it with the symbolism of the year also, because that symbolism is also in the sacrifice. Even in the hymns, they will say after 9 months, they had to struggle to sacrifice for 10 months. And only when they sacrifice 10 months, they find the sun in the darkness. So that's also that Vedic symbolism, which Aurobindo writes a lot. And Aurobindo says this symbolism of time in the Veda, it's also an inner time, and it's almost the 10 months, you could even say, as a journey through 10 planes of consciousness. You are growing, and the more you grow in your consciousness, you are also, so to say, entering into another level of existence. So you could even take it in such a way, that actually with the 10 months you find the sun, that means you have reached, so to say, different planes. So that's a huge topic also, which is all in the Rig Veda, which is also related to the Upanishadic knowledge of the Turiya, the fourth state of Om and of consciousness. So that's also just to mention passing, because you see all this origin of the Upanishads. I can clearly see it in the Rig Veda, and also I would say of the Tantra. So I would say the Rig Veda has both. It has the Upanishadic and the Tantric knowledge in its root form. And this is, you really see already in the Veda, also with Aditi, of course. We'll come tomorrow to it in the connection with her sons, the Adityas. So that's maybe then the other aspect. Then how is every book arranged, you see, if you look at it? Usually it is arranged according to the Rishi and the gods he worships. So there is, as I say, in the family books it's only one Rishi, but in the first book, so it starts with a particular Rishi, and then usually if he has a hymn to Agni, it will start with Agni first. So Agni, the fire, is the first god to be invoked. And then if there are more hymns, they will start with the big hymns first, in a particular meter, and then with the shorter hymns and another meter. So there is a total kind of a mind, arranging everything. It is very much arranged. That you can see very clearly. So first the hymns to Agni, then if there are, then the hymns to Indra or the Maruts and so on. So there are these different gods and goddesses in the Veda, which, so to say, create a system, It's a knowledge system. Like every god you can call and invoke as your Ishta Devata and relate to it, but at the same time in the bigger system, that particular god, although he is the one, but also in his front he is a certain psychological, spiritual power, in yourself, no, or which you have to realize. So meaning in that sense, the gods have these double aspects. They are that one transcendent, but they also manifest a certain phase, a certain faculty of the realization. Like Sri Aurobindo would say, Agni is the ascending fire of willpower, of consciousness, which prepares you, which grows inside the evolution and reaches towards the light. Whereas Indra is that power which is actually in the light and can come down, so to say, in the darkness only when there is already some light in the darkness, which would be the fire, which would be Agni. So in Sri Aurobindo's terminology, he would say that there has to be an awakening, an aspiration, so to say. Then, as I say, sometimes you could say, or even Saraswati, we will come to it today morning, also that river of inspiration, of knowledge. In one hymn, she will be invoked with other gods at a certain stage because now you have reached, so to say, that plane. Agni is kindled, so your fire is burning, your aspiration goes up, and then there is a kind of alchemy going on. There's a process in yourself, a psychological process, and when you are prepared enough or reached high enough, there would be a response. And that would be then the river of inspiration. That means your higher mind has opened, or you can take it in so many ways, and then she will flow down. So in one hymn, she will be put after several gods are invoked, only then there are some rigs to her. But there is also a hymn which is addressed to her alone, and there she is doing all the acts as if it looks. Like Indra is killing the Vritra, the coverer, he's removing all the coverings, she is also doing that. So Sri Aurobindo emphasizes that since all these different powers of the one are involved in this work, you can attribute the victory or the action also to each of them. So that is also there already, you could say, in the Veda. In a sense, you could say that preference for a particular god, that focus, like preference meaning your own inclination. So if you have inclinations towards the Shakti, then through the Shakti you open to all these other aspects. Or if it is the Ishvara, the Lord, So as I say, so in that way, there is, and Sri Aurobindo says, if we don't look carefully enough as the Veda was written, we think it's all a mix-up of so many. What is it all? It's all just trying to please the gods, and it's all a muddle of things. But he says it is not like that. It reflects that Indian mind already from the beginning. It had this synthetic approach to see also always in every god that one and transcendent God and relate to it. And then you can, give him all the names of the others. You can all integrate it. But at the same time, this distinction also is there that you can, to perfect yourself, you can realize it in many, many, many different aspects, should also be integrated. Like in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, there is Mahashakti, and then there will be Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi. Through each you can, so to say, address the Mahashakti, and even through her the Parashakti. But he would say the idea is that your instrument manifests all of them, not only wisdom, but also power and beauty and harmony and knowledge, perfection. So that's the idea, which also we could see in the Vedic gods if we look closer at it, you see. For example, again, to show it in the different context, Mitra is a form of Surya. Even later is the name of the sun, Mitra. So literally it means the friend. So for Sri Aurobindo, he shows very clearly he is related to that harmony and love of Chit. So he comes as a sun god, and only when some higher state is reached, he manifests as that Lord of love and harmony. Now look what the Western scholars did. They found in the Middle East, there were the Hittites, that was, it's today's Syria maybe. There was an ancient culture, and there was a peace contract between two different kingdoms. And in that peace contract, they mentioned Vedic god names, Mitra and the Ashwins and so on. So now, of course, it's a contract, so that means Mitra means the friend, the bringing together. What would be the term in English for that, no? So it's like you make a peace contract, an alliance, no? Yes, you see. Or you make even how you call that in German, we call it Vertrag. What would that mean? Treaty, something of that sort. Now imagine because of this, I think it was originally a German scholar 100 years ago, he calls Mitra always that god of the treaty, And now it has become fixed, and it's surprisingly in the latest American translation, she translates the German terms into English. She also calls him the god of the treaty, and it is fixed for them now, wherever Mitra comes. But if you go deeper, in the whole thing, you see very clearly. It also fits, it's beautiful. You can take it in that way, that you invoke, the archetype of all friendship, and even as kings in your contract. But you see, it is so much more. It is actually the Ishvara as the Lord of consciousness and, and knowledge. And so that is the thing, how you could say, how you can look through the Rig Veda, where you can take it up, how deep you can look, where you will end up finally. And that is, of course, as I say, that's why we have this, in a way, oversimplification. Then people remain, in the more outward layer. But to see that ancient mind, like what we say, when you make a marriage and you invoke the gods, or when you anoint a king, why do you do this? So that we, in a way, don't see really in the deeper sense anymore. That they had really seen, the highest behind this thing. Because that's for us so alien in our modern mind still. Or we know it only in its distorted forms, so to say. So why is the Veda still looked upon as this original thing? And why do you say, and why even the Gotras have survived? So I always feel, yes, because it was something unique. It's a record of a very unique period in the human history. And that's maybe when we ask, what would be the relevance for us today? Why should we be busy with this? What does it still tell to us? As if there was a period in humanity where life was more integrated. I always mention, for example, even you don't have this in the Upanishads anymore, you have the Dhyava Prithvi, you have a dual goddess, a couple goddess, heaven and earth. They are invoked as a couple in the dual case. So heaven and earth are all the time addressed to in the Veda, which you would say, what does that really mean? That spirit and nature, what is it? Why both, so to say, are on an equal footing, which I always feel in that way, it is really through Sri Aurobindo's evolutionary knowledge. When you look at this more, it makes you more sense, that you see in ancient times, life was not seen so apart. The world is a kind of playground of the gods, of the manifestation, of the divine, of the consciousness. So it was not segregated as it became later on.
Yeah, I'm still thinking, what is the context? What should be bothered?
Yes.
What will I get out of this? What should I learn this?
Yes. Yeah, I would feel, first of all, it should be really, it should depend on your own inclination also, right? Because I feel, why should you do it, That's for sure.
Why did you go into this?
Yes, of course, I'm maybe some very particular case in that way, because it became very early period in my life, it became something like a passion and a mission for me, very natural. That happens, of course, to few people, probably in this way, but still, in my case, when I was 20 years, I was in a kind of total life crisis, and I was looking for meaning and purpose. And then, so to say, at the last moment, I read a book in a magazine about Auroville. Then I came to Auroville here, and for a short stay. And then, of course, I went to the ashram, and then I came in touch with Sri Aurobindo's work. And I returned 1 year later. I was 21 that time. And then, of course, in the ashram, there are all these books. You know how many books Sri Aurobindo has written, perhaps. So you have, I was immediately attracted by this ancient kind of poetry, his own poetry, but also the Upanishads, and then, of course, that hymns to the mystic fire. There was immediately something which attracted me, without kind of preparation, so to say. There was just something there. And then since that time, I started to read this book in English. I actually learned English. My native is German. I learned English actually by studying Aurobindo's books. And then when you look at the Hymns to the Mystic Fire, you will have the Devanagari written on top in the publication. So I was so curious about that. So I came 3-4 times to India, and then in 1981, when I settled in Auroville, I slowly started to learn to read Devanagari because I was so curious about that. But actually because I wanted to get at this original Sanskrit. So I was also interested in the Gita. And I did many studies, reading Sri Aurobindo's works, but also reading, Zen Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, so many different teachings also. But somehow I always came around and came back to the Veda. And so then I really went into it, and I was really alone. There was nobody else interested in that, but it became, so to say, my passion. But as I say, right, you say, for what purpose? For me, it was as if maybe I have found a kind of image which I can identify with, like these Vedic gods, because there is no murti even, So what is that fire, no? It is something more, you could say something more real, but also more abstract at the same time. How you want to call this? How you relate to the fire, So for me, this fire was always my own fire, so to say. My hunger after knowledge, after truth, after meaning in life, so to say. So that was, so to say, my connection with it, and then I got very much interested in that, you see, all the while. And then, of course, also there was a kind of identification with this period. For me, it was kind of natural to understand these Vedic fathers are my fathers. I felt this inner connection to it. And that, on the next step to that was when I saw how much misunderstood is the Veda and how much actually nonsense is written about it, how much violation is done to it, that also affected me in a way, because I felt it is insulting. What an ignorance, and people are judging things in such a superficial way. So in that way, I also felt I started to translate, make German translation, go deeper, then I had to learn Sanskrit, of course, and because I always felt I wanted to share this also and to rectify something also. Because I feel, in a way, it's also our whole vision of the past is blurred because of that, if you look from that perspective also. That reminds me, in the context with Sri Aurobindo, on commentary on the Veda, also when he started to go deeper into the Veda and write his first publication, in the Secret of the Veda, in articles in the Arya magazine in 1914, I think. Immediately, when it was published, he got a criticism in the Madras newspaper, about what he's doing there. So people were, so to say, already very fixed in what is the Veda and what it is not. So meaning that misunderstanding had already established itself, or certain kind of, I don't want to say dogmas, but certainly Veda is this, or it is only ritual, or it is only that. And that was maybe what touched me really, because I'm also not such a rational type. I'm a more intuitive, emotional type. I liked always this connection myself personally with nature and the God. So I always felt, why should I reject life or nature if I'm looking for a God? And also what I really liked personally in the Vedic hymns, as a comparison to the Upanishads, I like this addressing of the Devatas. So the knowledge is given through your own relation with the divinity. It doesn't become just, a kind of abstract mental knowledge, or I felt there is the danger also that you stay too much in your own mind, in concepts, even if you take up teachings, like the Upanishads, can become very vague and abstract. But I always like this approach of the Vedic hymns, that it is also in the form of a prayer, of a speech. So the God is directly addressed, you understand? So that is my story, and then, so I did so many things, and I had different intensities with this work, you see. And I can see also the difficulty, but as I say, in a way, I wanted to mention this right when Sri Aurobindo was writing about the Veda and he got his first criticism. Later also, when even Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan wrote his book on Indian philosophy, in that book he was still mentioning when he writes about the Veda, no, they always think Veda is very old, its origin, but it is primitive, it's ritual, it is not knowledge, you understand? So that segregation also in India which has established itself, Upanishad is knowledge, Veda is only ritual. And he criticizes Sri Aurobindo because Sri Aurobindo believes it was such a high period. He wouldn't say it was the total golden age, but it was already a higher achievement in the humanity, from which in a certain way it has descended. There might be a reason for this, but so he believed in the cycles of society, of the different yugas. And Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, who had more this Western education, he says, but we believe in evolution. And for him, evolution was just up. So the Veda could not have been, in a certain way, a higher achievement than what comes afterwards. Whereas Sri Aurobindo says evolution goes in a spiral, and there are ups and downs. And of course, every down, so to say, also takes up some new material. It is not just unnecessary. It is perfecting something which maybe what was left out at that time. But meaning in that way also, from this point of view of the human history to see, because our whole image of history is actually quite conditioned, by our later knowledge. And even if you look at the modern mind, the modern mind is exaggerating also the primitivism of the ancients, I feel, in a way also. Because they didn't have maybe these technological inventions which we have. That does not mean they were very highly civilized and cultivated in their mind. And the Rig Veda is a big reflection of this. But there is even more, and that is what you could say, it's that essential knowledge of India, which is what the Upanishads brought out. But there was gradually that fraction, so to say, between heaven and earth. And also, when you ask me still in this connection what purpose it has, I was traveling abroad 5-6 years ago in Europe, this whole yoga tradition, now the Hatha yoga tradition, which is all over the world, immensely. Every little city, even in Germany, has a yoga center. And they are practicing asana, pranayama. Many of them, they go to India, they chant some mantra. They get mantras, nobody explains the meaning to them. They don't know what it is, what God they are actually invoking. And so these people also, they ask actually many times, they will say, we are interested in philosophy. And then of course for them Veda is because it's the origin, they think that is the philosophy. So I talked about this there also because I felt like in modern India, we all want to grow, we want to perfect life in a way also and come out of poverty and unhygiene and whatever, raise the whole level of the society in this development, material development. Then the question is for what purpose, right? And in Europe, when you come there, it is actually declining now, I would say, gradually, but there was a big achievement done on this level, the perfection of life, the public transport, traffic, everything is smooth and everything is beautiful, and so when you are with these yoga people, they have their yoga mat and beautiful candles, and it's all harmony. They are very engaged in harmony and create a beautiful society among themselves, which is very beautiful. But for me there is a but, because when they go into the ideology, now they want to know what is the origin of this. Then if you are taught actually that life is an illusion, which many teachings still say, our modern teachers, they base themselves on this illusion, life is, just a maximum, it's a bridge, you just live decent and then your idea is to become free, mukti, and not to be reborn anymore. Then I felt even there is like a gap, because when people go into their studies, they get this kind of idea of freedom and no rebirth anymore, and actually now they are all busy in that perfection of life and the beautification. And look back, I mean, from where have we got this? From our parents and grandparents. They all have prepared this for us, in a way. They have actually given their whole life for this, and maybe excluded that inner to a certain extent. But so my sense was, why not to bring that together? to see that this material beautifying and perfecting of life is part of the spiritual evolution, you understand? And I feel this also, for those who are not, come in touch with Sri Aurobindo's teaching, or who also want to go to the past and ancient texts, the Veda is really there as that document in a way which is relating to both, to heaven and earth, who sees that purpose in the evolution of life, which is especially Agni, and I hope very soon now we will go to the Agni hymn also, that we can be more engaged and I'm not only talking to you. So any thought you have about this, what I'm telling? Does it make some sense in which way I'm trying to say? That where is the teaching which in a way, I feel in India basically it's still there. People, they do puja, they acknowledge the gods in life, so to say, but when they go to thinking, they go many times to kind of illusionist kind of mindset. That is still, or even when you look at the Gita, but then you emphasize actually that moksha in a sense. So I met so many people, they say, okay, we haven't made it yet, So meaning we'll still go on living, but one day we'll be free and get rid of that whole thing. But there is a different view, and that we have to feel. No? Sometimes, of course, I also myself passed through this stage where I was struggling with life because I wanted to be in a certain way which my nature just didn't allow me to be. I had to recognize that I have this human nature. So I have to work with it, so to say. But that is, in a way, very difficult. So then sometimes you rather feel also, get rid of it and become free. Just go out of all of this. But there is another way. And for me, it was more this Vedic knowledge also which reconciles me more with life. That life is, so to say, a growth, a manifestation of the spirit. There is even one hymn to Agni which one can translate in many ways. Literally it says, he is the immortals who grows with a body. So, and it's a big statement because how can the immortal grow with a body? What does it mean that the divine has a body, and that he is growing with the body? And that fits so much with Sri Aurobindo's idea of evolution again. So he says there is this indwelling Godhead, the evolutionary Godhead. There's the divine presence which is building more and more perfect forms in nature to express itself more and more. And at that, then the dichotomies in which we are still living, of that mix of truth and falsehood, pain and suffering and pleasure and all this, it would be overcome to a certain extent in the human evolution. So we are in a process. This is not final. But I feel it is actually the Veda which could harmonize this gap in a way, because in our rational mind we have this kind of theory of freedom and non-birth, and it's all an illusion. But in our practical life, no, we want to live and also be engaged. And I feel as if there is a gap somewhere, and that gap does not need to be there. So, and that gap is actually closed in the Vedic knowledge, I feel. And when you look through the Veda then to the Upanishads, you will also see, you look at the Upanishads in a slightly different light also. Because that is that creation myths, which they are telling. At the beginning was the self, and he was alone, and he wanted another. And in the Taittiriya Upanishad, they will say also, at the beginning, there was only Prajapati, and he said, let me have creatures, let me become many. So what is this? Where do you bring this? All these terms, you understand? Like our later philosophical systems, they are also extricating and supporting themselves by certain quotes from certain texts. But if you look at them as a whole, if you look the whole Upanishads as the whole Vedanta, you will see it is much closer with the Veda also. It has certain lines and trends maybe, and even exaggerations, but if you look at it as a whole, all the Upanishads, which is usually not done, we are selecting a very few Upanishads and then again from them certain quotes, we don't see that the Upanishads are also much more integrative, coming from the Veda actually, and referring back to the Veda. So this would be one point also. Is there a spirituality possible, which in a way is harmonizing the beyond and the here. Later, you see, we have these simple terms nirguna and saguna and so on, But as I say, this is in the Veda also there, but in a more living, organic way.
So do we need to understand, as they say, the Sanskrit language is like this, say
Yes.
around, and there are some vibrations, and that's about enough. You don't need to know what exactly.
That is for me very, excuse me, the word superficial in a certain way means it's very complacent, and it's sufficient actually, I would agree in a way, to do a certain sadhana and to arouse certain energies, and do certain purifications. It is sufficient. But when you study the Veda itself, how they deal with this, they will always emphasize that the mind and the heart and the mantra, they have to go together. So there is these lines where they say the mantra is formed in the heart and held in the mind, or spoken through the mind, which means that the mind is part of the expression. So I feel if it's held in the mind, that what does it mean? That means you should know the meaning. And if you look at the Rig Veda, there is such a knowledge imbibed there. It is actually overcharged with knowledge which you can really understand with your mind. You can go into it, You have to broaden your mind. Actually, that's what I feel, frankly, for example, even if you read ancient texts, or even in the Upanishads, they'll say he comes to a guru, and they will say, let him come with firewood in hand. That means, is he ready to be kindled? Is Agni to be kindled? That's one aspect. But they will also say, have you studied the Veda? And later, it becomes this kind of formal thing, and they say, oh, Veda, we don't need it. But when you look originally, why did he ask that? I feel it would really mean, have you exposed yourself to this knowledge, which is so complex and so vast, actually. Because if you really, studying the Veda would actually mean to work upon your mind, to change your perception of things, you understand? And yes, mantra maybe will do this in a certain way, but I feel it is exaggerated a little bit, this aspect of, you don't need meaning. And this is also, I think it's in all long since centuries, the gurus started to do this, but maybe they give their own teaching, and then they will say that mantra is just, to arouse certain energies. But actually the mantras themselves, they are so profound in meaning. I feel if you want to take one mantra and do it as a sadhana, as I said, to arouse something, to awake something, that would be fine. But that's also the difficulty, the complexity in the Vedic hymns, because it's not one mantra. It is a whole hymn. So there is a sequence of thought, you see. There is an opening and a middle and a closing. There's a development and a reference and suggestions in so many ways. So it's difficult to get an understanding even of the whole hymn. But the understanding is there, but it's a higher faculty of knowledge, so to say, a higher universal vision which speaks to you. And it asks you to come up to this. And that you would say, that would be the exercise. If I really deal with this, I am raising my mind to a different level. But so that's also this idea which Aurobindo in his yoga also talks about. The mind has many levels and gradations. Because in the modern life also they will say mind, and you have to go beyond mind. But what is that? Is that just mind and beyond mind? So the Veda has a whole system of different heavens and levels of existence, like Sri Aurobindo has. He has a higher mind, and an illumined mind, an intuitive mind. So these gradations are there, and they can grow and develop by the study of Veda, for example. That is my experience. You wanted to say something?
I just have an observation. When you look at the Indian traditions, I say this out of my own experience. Somewhere I think everything was traditionalized. This is the way it is supposed to be.
Yes.
Maybe sometime during the Bhakti movement.
Formalized, you could say.
Very, very formalized and traditionalized. Because in my family, I've heard my grandparents, even my dad speak of this, that we have access only to one part of the Yajurveda.
Yes.
We cannot read the Rig Veda at all.
Yes.
Right? So somewhere I think in this whole, through the whole process, because it also kind of refers back to Aurokul guru.
Yes.
So that has become a limitation in the Indian mind.
Yes.
So trying to say, hey, this is a pattern you need to follow. Even in the Upanishads, we don't refer to all of the Upanishads. There's only one part of the Upanishads that we always get a reference from.
Exactly.
Which perhaps is the innate limitation that we as a society are facing. And it's drilling down to the next generation. When I look at my dad, he at least reads parts of it.
Yes.
When you look at my generation, there are only questions.
Yes.
But this whole context that you have said makes
Yes.
it very clear, because also in the context of when you look at it from the light of Aurobindo,
Yes.
it just is, if you have to, if there are layers that you have to peel off yourself, looking inward, figuring out,
Right.
the deeper knowledge, it just goes straight back to the Veda perhaps.
Right. So actually, Aurobindo calls that, the convention. He also talks about this in the human evolution, and there are also Western psychologists. They see there are certain periods in the life where people create something, and then it is taken over by the mass, but then gradually it becomes a convention, and convention actually means you are not really reflecting on it anymore. You take it just for granted, and even the religions become all like that. And even I feel myself, we all have this tendency. For example, there is one mantra also which I like very much in the Rig Veda. I will choose this and pray it every day. Very soon it will become a convention, meaning I'm not reflecting on it anymore. It becomes mechanical. So you could say if you use a mantra which you don't understand, maybe you even don't feel it because you didn't understand it. But use a beautiful, in your mother tongue, a prayer which you want to talk to your God, and then how quickly actually you noticed you're praying it without being present anymore in this. So this tendency is part of our human situation. Our subconscious mind takes over, and we are no more really with it. And in Synthesis of Yoga, Sri Aurobindo writes about this. He calls it the ascent of the sacrifice, and that is actually Agni. So he says that Agni, that force of awareness of the soul power has to burn in us, and if that is, so to say, not burning, it becomes a convention. So he calls that the soul and the act, and that rightly we easily lose that, the soul and the act. So it has to be always a living expression. And that I would also say, this is the central theme of the Rigvedic hymns. That's why the Agni is always invoked first. And that's also very interesting, because even that disappears in the Upanishads. Actually, in the Brahmanical tradition, or in the ritual tradition, this has survived to a certain extent, and I feel we even still have it in the puja in the temple, that fire, which everybody is, so to say, eager to go to. Sometimes it's really strange how people want that thing, But where is it? And, he has to put it alive for you, but you can also create it yourself. You can kindle that fire. So.
Yeah, what is symbolic? It actually is just symbolic. We have seen. We just take it very literally.
Yes, but meaning it's so interesting also. So actually everything is still there, so to say, but it is covered over with ages, with convention, and also, of course, Aurobindo said the mind changed and other ideas emerged, and even the meaning of the Vedic gods, what they were in themselves at that time, even in the Upanishad, it already shifts, because there's a new Brahmident idea, which is the Brahman only. Then the gods become already lower than the Brahman. In the Veda, each god is the Brahman. That is also the unique difference. And then so there are these specializations, but there might be also have been reasons for that, Sri Aurobindo says there might have been even a kind of exhaustion, But the Veda represents, so to say, this intensive period in the human civilization where a lot of aspiration and light was done. And you could say, I feel in India is still profiting from this in some way, because it's still the remnants of that which we are still in a way thriving on.
I have a question. Once I was reading some book of Mother, and she said that even if you don't understand Savitri,
yes,
read through.
Right.
But that contradicts with what you said, that you have to understand the meaning of mantras.
Yes.
And I was also reading one of the neurologists, J. Ramchandran, and he mentioned Veeraj. He mentions that a lot of times, even if you don't understand the meaning, mere sound can create certain experiences in mind.
Yes. I agree that is there, but in the case of Savitri, for me there is still a big difference, because it is, when you read Savitri, that means you know English. You understand? So that means you are still reading it actually with knowledge, but you are not reflecting on it. You are not trying to understand it while you read. That means you are open with it. but you're still actually not only listening to the sound, because you read the English. Whereas in Sanskrit, no, people repeat the mantra even without knowing Sanskrit. There's a difference for me there. You get that point? She wouldn't say, she wouldn't say to a French person who doesn't know English, read Savitri. So you have to know English even then to read Savitri. I would say that. There is this, do you get this subtle difference?
But frankly, when I read Savitri, there is very little part of Savitri which I can barely understand.
Yes.
There are so many vocabularies which I'm not able to
Right.
grasp at all.
Right.
Do you think it makes sense? Because ultimately I'm not able to understand it.
I am sure she would, even then she would have said, but then get a dictionary and find the meaning. I don't think this excludes this approach, It's a kind of a balance, I would say, which you have to do in between. That's the same thing with poetry. You don't understand it with your rational mind, but that doesn't mean you don't get you get all the sense of poetry from the rhythm, from the color of the word, the sound, and the meaning. It is not totally, it's not that the meaning is non-existent.
So I think what he said, we have to look at it in context.
Yes.
Because mother, if I remember right, she also speaks of a specific situation.
Of
when
course.
you're in a flux.
Yes.
Open this up. You can read whatever words
Of course.
comes in front of you.
It
It is a different application.
So that's a different.
And in that sense, even when you look at your hymns in the Vedas, just for your concentration, or if you want to just,
Yes.
you
But
still
there
read
is,
it, but it's
right.
not about processing it.
Because, and you can even say, read it with your heart, not with your mind, because we don't know exactly, but heart also has a mind. This is actually, I was mentioning also this Vedic terms, I don't know whether we would find time, because in the Veda, for example, they will have mati. Later, no, even in the Gita, mati means already opinion. But in some Upanishads, mati means already still like a kind of a consciousness, a knowledge, So in the Veda, they will have mati in general as a thought. Then they will have sumati, the perfect thought, or the happy thought, the right thought. Then they will have pramati, the forward thought. Then they will have aramati, the spread out thought. Then they have durmati, the wrong thought. And then they have anumati, the following thought. And then there is one more amati, no thought, unconsciousness. So meaning they use all these terms which are very subtle. And then with that mati, and Aurobindo also says, mati relates usually more to the emotions. It's an emotive state, but still it is thought. From the root man, to perceive, to think, like mind. So meaning, I always feel there are even hymns where they say, Vishwamitra has a very beautiful hymn, he says, a mati which is spoken from the heart. So they many times when they say mati, they say it is spoken from the heart. A thought, a mati spoken from the heart goes to Indra, its lord, And it's also interesting, then they will say, when it is born, it remains wakeful in the knowledge, the thought when it moves. You see? And then the Rishi says, and Indra, you have to take note of what is born. And then Aurobindo comments on that. The higher mind has to recognize it. So your higher mind has to know, has to recognize, to take part of the mantra, so to say. So he would always say that. And there is this other hymn where they say it is shaped in the heart and manasa dai, it is held with the mind. So as if there is no contradiction there, but I feel it is not this, because when mother speaks, she speaks to us nowadays, either we are just, not developed enough to think, or we are totally rational, extreme rational in the thinking, analytical thinking, And if you approach a poem with an analytical mind, you will not get much of it, I think so. And for me personally, the real poem for me always has to be intuitive. It has to be spontaneous. For me it is, we come today maybe still to Saraswati. For me the real poem has to come from Saraswati, means from the inspiration. It's from a higher plane,
So how do you practice? You're doing some physical thing like a Surya Namaskar, you're even doing something physical. And you're saying...
Well, that is, you can do so many things. You can integrate all these things, Of course, for me, since from the beginning I came to Aurobindo's yoga and the Veda, there was my focus was never to do asanas or any of this exercise as a sadhana. If I do it, then I do it rather just to remain flexible and things like that. So I didn't feel the need, so to say. That's what Aurobindo says. Actually, he says we are mental beings. So we could actually start with the mind in our yoga. It depends. But that wouldn't, because he says to do hatha yoga and all that as a whole path, it takes too much time. And actually look in Europe, why you have so many actually yoga teachers now. Those who are really totally in hatha yoga, no, and they have to practice hours every day, they do this, and they become so perfect in the body and flexible, but actually they want to become teachers because they have no time to work anymore. They have to do all this exercise constantly, if that is really their sadhana. But he would say that is not necessary. Of course, in the Veda you don't find that, but I feel these are again inclinations. It will help us. That was for me also understandable. The asana helps you to, if you have to calm down and channel your energies and become poised, observe yourself, and then you can rather work with your mind, because otherwise you'll be so much in your physical body consciousness and your mind will be just running constantly. So it's a preparation, even in the Raja Yoga, for concentration. You see, so that depends where we start. Now in the Veda, I really feel, because the mantra is the means, I would really say that in the Veda, that means is the mantra itself, the hymn. Now, of course, from where is that hymn coming? I always mention in my writing, for example, I've said, if I say you do it with the mantra, even if you have your own mantra, use that. If your inner tells you spontaneously something, then you do this. Otherwise, you take it from a rishi. Yes. So for me, also to study the Veda and recite the Veda is also as this. It's a meditation. It is a concentration, so to say. You focus. Sometimes it might also do if you recite it without meaning or you are not present there. It depends it's an alchemy. There are so many factors in our psychology which we are not maybe even aware of. We don't know actually the process of consciousness, how it works. When we concentrate, when we pray, what's actually happening.